Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. So everyone, this is Dr. Brent Davis, a friend of mine who is a chiropractor, a homeopath, a master herbalist, and an applied kinesiologist. Throughout his career, he is focused on bringing both forgotten and new applications of master herbs as they relate to use in his general clinical practice. From the remote mountains and jungles of Peru, to the plains of West Australia, to the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, Dr. Davis is inspired to locate rare flowers worldwide that can act as divine gifts to bring greater ease and joy to life and assist in the evolution of humanity's consciousness. He's witnessed hundreds of people overcome grief, reduce stress, strengthen their relationships, and improve their lives by taking the Flora-Live uncut flower essences that he's developed. In addition to being a licensed chiropractor in California and Tennessee, he has advanced postgraduate training in classical homeopathy and applied kinesiology, as well as training in numerous other natural diagnostic and therapeutic techniques. When Brent is not treating patients or traveling on floral adventures, he lives on his organic herb farm in the center of the Flora-Live forest, about 75 miles outside of Nashville. So thank you, Brent, for being on this call with me.
Oh, good. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I'm in the loft of my farmhouse up on the farm today, and then I go into the practice late today.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get right to it, but before we hear about some of the wonderful modalities that you're using that people need to hear about today, I wonder if you'd be willing to tell us a little bit first about your own story as a healer. What brought you to where you are today?
I guess when you talk to people that have been involved in holistic healing, they always talk about the wounded healer. And I remember a wonderful story about a teacher who was interviewing people with whom he would pass on his healing attributes and abilities, a tremendous shaman who was looking at a group of students. And curiously, no one could quite understand how he chose had the most difficult karma. And that's who he chose. And because he saw that if that person rose up and overcame all those obstacles, that they would be very powerful, a very powerful being. And that's what happened. So that's sort of been my life story, feeble and enfeebled as a youngster. And that was in my book called The Floral Hand of God, Healing Codes of Flowers Revealed, Secret Healing Codes of Flowers Revealed. That's the first part of the book. It starts out as what happened to me in childhood. But it began this long journey of starting out in chronic illness, looking at all of my comrades and people in high school and all the cool guys, and I couldn't be part of it because I was a social misfit due to illness, due to weak energy, spleen energy, very disturbed, extremely failure of kidney energy. All the things that give us vitality were gone. In a long story short, because of the very odd karmic situation I had of choosing the people that I came in with. It was just kind of a bad mark at the beginning. So I had a lot to overcome, and pretty much all the chronic illnesses that anyone has had, I've experienced. Now I'm 68. I had my first baby boy 9.5 months ago with my wife, she will be 43 shortly. And that's on my page. I think we're gonna, there'll be people that'll be able to see the 3-day health intensive page, and it shows a image of me when I was 38. And then it shows every few years of what happened to me until I'm 68 with my baby. So picture's worth, 1,000 words. That's what happens to a number of my patients retro age. They go backward in time. These are patients, certainly not with everyone, but there's a subset of people that when I look at their photos, I take photos of people when they come in, and then I look at them, a year later, and many of these people have been around as patients for over a decade. And you look back and you go, geez, you know what, they really haven't aged. So that's our goal, is to reduce the core causes, which are mental, emotional, spiritual, frequently, and then environmental causes, which are horribly challenging now, and structural causes, not to overlook that the attempt is, and it's not an easy thing. And now, after having been in practice 42 years, it is easy for me, but it wasn't easy when I started out. I mean, when I used to intake a patient, it was an hour and a half, and I go, oh my God, I'm late for the next person. I still don't know what to do. Now, when someone comes in, the healing has begun before they ever get in the door. It's so darned easy. Because this is what's happened with the people that are doing the 3-day health intensives. Oh my God, I'm so glad I found you. There's something that calls out to them. I know you can help me. And that's it. When a person comes in with that attitude, and so the goal on my new website was to put it really concisely so that they go, oh yeah, I gotta go. I already know that. And that's the goal. That's the battle is half over.
What you're talking about, Brent, is intention, right? And consent, that kind of, when you focus your mind in a certain direction, like you're headed in that direction now. And so we're definitely going to get into talking about the 3-day intensive, because chances are there are already people listening to you who are like, that's the guy. Like, that's the guy I work with.
Well,
because But before we get there, I want to talk about the flowers, because one of the things that struck me when I first met you was that we were at a conference. I think it was a biological medicine conference, and
BRMI. Yeah, it was 2017, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it was sooner. It was before that. It was earlier than that, because I've known you for
Maybe.
longer. But anyway, it was amazing being in your presence. I described it afterwards to people as if I'd been sitting in a field of flowers.
Oh.
Talking to the flowers. That's what it felt like. I felt like you were the flower whisperer. So I really want to make sure people hear you talk about what flower essences are and why they're so potentially transformative.
The book, I took 2 years out of my life. It was right before I set the intention of finding somebody to marry. I really had to get very, very clear on that. And because I knew that my book was like weird, because I did have a practice, but I had people taking over the manufacturing company, the herbal products, which we make herbal products and flower essences. And there were people doing that, and they never saw me. So I was in this world of just simply getting downloads to write the book. And that, it was very, very difficult for me. And I'm going to write other books, but they'll never be as hard as that one. But the word I used is ineffable, meaning you cannot put words to understanding the frequencies. But I think I did a pretty good job, because Dr. William Tiller, who's the world's leading authority in quantum mind, and now I haven't talked to him for a few months. I think he's still alive. He's in his middle to later 80s. He has spent his life understanding intention and proving how intention changes physical matter. So when I spoke with him and visited with him in Scottsdale, Arizona, where he lives, we spent a weekend together, and with this amazing man. There's no one else on the planet like him. And he is this extremely erudite scientist, but also a great spirit. And so I ran by my concepts. I said, well, what do you think? Because, this is person that really understands quantum physics. And he just took it apart and said, yeah, no, that's right. And here's the reasons why. That when you, through a vision that I was given, figured out a way to take a flower, encase it in an extraction vessel, and extract it while it's living, the roots of the flower, because they're intact and the flower has not been cut, are what he described as the power necessary to drive a dipole antenna. That's Dr. Tiller talking. Because a flower if you look at them, and the book has a whole section of little flowers where it's so obvious that they're antennas. They've, you know, they're what's called a Yagi antenna. That's what his language. He wrote a part of the book talking about flowers as antennas. So they are pulling in information. The information is encoded in light, comes into the flower petal. The flower petal transfers that information to water by something called epitaxial transfer. Most physicists don't know what that is, but it's a direct transfer of information from one surface, one crystalline, semi-crystalline water content in the flower goes into the water, and there you have it. You have a massive amount of information from the universe. Now the question is, what kind of information is in the flower? And there's no way of knowing. It's impossible, and it doesn't matter how bright and brilliant you are. So I go out and I'm guided. I have little guardians and guides all around me, and the book talks about how everything falls in place. Serendipity to the nth degree. It's insane. It's not logical. It's not logical because it doesn't make sense that so many things could line up to enable me to finally get to a location where I'm supposed to be to find a particular flower to extract. And I know when it's supposed to be extracted, and then I generally figure out what it's useful for when I get back to the clinic. Sometimes the flower will tell me, like my last trip to Peru was in 2015, and I went there to find flowers that would address the terrible crisis that we're in now with a tendency to addiction, whether it's internet addiction, pornography addiction, alcohol, whatever it is there. And it's because the core calling on that was get rid of hopelessness. That was it. Because why are people addicted? Because they're hopeless. And I mean, if we were ever at a time in history when things look pretty hopeless, it's right now. Because we got a lot of dark beings really flexing their muscles. So yeah, to overcome hopelessness helps get rid of addiction. And that was, so I knew that I would find some flowers for that, and I did.
You found more than one flower for that on that trip?
Together, those flowers are still not fully characterized, and a couple of them appear in what we call a shamanic blend in something called Smile. There's a wonderful product, I think you know that. It's a spray, and it can also be taken internally. And a couple of the flowers are in there. Now, the curious thing about some of these flowers in that region, which I've gone to many times in the Andes, there are two areas that I go to. They're both hidden, and they're both to remain anonymous forever because they cannot have external human thought coming into the area. It would disturb the whole ecosystem of energy, which has been built up through sacred exercises by shamanic people for centuries. So I go there to be as invisible as I can and just simply pick up that energy and bring it back. But some of the flowers cannot be seen. We can't show pictures of them because then it would hit it would disturb their energy. So that trip made it a little difficult because some of the flowers can't be seen.
Yeah, wow. So for those who haven't read your book and talked to you before and may not even know what a flower essence is, can you kind of break it down for people for whom this might be really new information?
Okay, so most people know about affirmations. Okay, most people know that you've got things in your unconscious mind that are really holding you up in your healing. And it's been since, you can heal your body, you can heal your mind, whatever, those books that came out in the 1980s. So that's been around for a long time. What people don't know is that when you have, until energy psychology became in the middle and later 1980s, when that started, and I was there when it was born. I was at the ICAK, International College of Applied Kinesiology meetings, where really the essence of energy psychology, which came from chiropractors and an MD who was a psychiatrist, those people put together the foundation of what is energy psychology, which has enabled practitioners to check to see where our limiting beliefs are. So I was there when that started. So, and that was in the late 80s. And I began using practices, they were manual techniques to try to reverse unconscious mind programming. But that was the magnificent tool that allowed me in 2000 to start the Floor Alive 15 years of my life in developing that. Because right away, you can find out what a flower does. The problem that I always had looking at Bach's work, which I studied extensively, Edward Bach's work, I always asked myself, how did this guy know what these things did? How did he know what the flower did? Well, it's very hard to know what something does, but with energy psychology practice, let me give you an example. One of the first important flowers in Peru that I extracted was a flower called Flor de la Luna, flower of the moon. And the shaman took me there, and he did not tell me what the flower was for. He just looked at me and said, that's very important. Oh, so I went, okay. Well, if he says it's very important, I'm going to extract it. And when I did that, I got back to the office, and normally it's a patient that comes in, and within just a moment, they give you your insight for that visit. They tell you what's needed. So I'm sure you've seen this. It's just amazing how if you listen, which many doctors don't, but if you actually listen to your patient, they'll tell you what's needed during the visit. So when I got back, I got several people that was obvious relationships were horrible. They weren't receiving love. So I thought, I wonder if any of these flowers that I collected, I'm going to grab that flower that this shaman told me was important. So I had the person say, I allow myself to receive love, energy psychology testing. The facilitated muscle went weak. They became weak, meaning they did not allow themselves to receive love. I gave them an essence of a drop of that newly prepared essence, bing, strengthened. Then I went on 100 people later. It was really clear that that flower was very powerful for enabling people to receive love. When you can receive love, you can receive opportunities, including money. If you can't receive love, chances are you got a problem receiving other things as well. So it's huge. It's one of those fundamental things. And then another one was blue-eyed grass, which grows right here on the edge of the forest, which removes memories of trauma and abuse. Huge. It's another huge thing. So there's kind of a triad. You've got to have the receiving of love. You have to be free from the effects of emotional trauma and abuse. Those are two huge stages of this triad. And then the third one and the last one is manifestation. So I jokingly say in my book, you got all these guys out there teaching manifest, make your dreams, become this, and then the guys that have the Ferraris and the Porsches and they show all those pictures in their private jets, you can have this too. That's the mainstream manifestation stuff. But if you don't have your love fixed, and if you don't have freedom from emotional trauma and abuse, you might get those things, but your empire will fall apart. So you got to start out with the basics. And manifestation is the third thing you do. You got to take care of the
crawl before you can walk, in other words.
That's it. And it goes quickly. Sometimes those flowers, and that's why when I wrote the book, I had to try to describe the ineffable, which is not understandable. And I think we did an interview. We hope we'll have that interview, so it's edited, with a doctor that just found these flowers about 2 months ago. But he's already had over 100 patients on them, and he just goes, and he's been in practice 26 years. So he goes, oh my God, I don't know, this is insane. I've never seen anything like this. Now he already had done a lot of eclectic management. He's really good with nutrition. He's a very accomplished holistic chiropractor, applied kinesiologist, and he has a very broad practice. So he already had done a lot of stuff with his patients. And that's very good timing to put in a new therapy when you've already, done a lot of good work with your patients. And then you stick that in there and bang, you go, oh my gosh, what did this stuff do? So he's fun, to see his enthusiasm.
Well, I want to take pause for a second because you've given a lot of great information. And I know there are some people out there who are like brand new to the idea of flower essences, maybe even brand new to the idea that your thoughts create your reality, maybe even becoming aware that they have some trauma that is sort of at the root or part of the root of whatever's going on for them in their own healing journey. So I think there's a lot to kind of grapple with. And I want also to just summarize some of the things I learned from your book that helped me as I was grappling with this. Because when I met you, I hadn't, I knew there was Dr. Bach's rescue remedy. Like that's what I knew about. I didn't really know how it worked. Didn't really know if it worked. And I really delved into flower essences after meeting you because I was just so intrigued by your story and began using them for myself. So what I want to just highlight is that what you're saying is that flowers are tiny little radars pulling in and receiving information from the universe, from God, in essence, right?
Coded information. That was the title of the book, The Floral Hand of God. I didn't know how else to say it.
Yeah. And so those little antennas, those little satellites receiving, and it's not, maybe not all flowers. I think some special flowers.
No, absolutely not. That's crazy. That's the story in the chapter 8 about Madame Fate. I was looking at some psychic told me I had to find a white flower in Jamaica. All right, I'll read the whole chapter. It's one of my most favorite chapters. But a white flower, well, I was out there looking for a day and I saw like, 80 white flowers. And I would look at them and work with them, check the energy of them. And I go, no, it's not that white flower. And I kept going for the right white flower, which I eventually found. But yeah, it's very selective flowers. And apparently, and this is the weird part of it, apparently somebody, whoever the guides, guardians, universal beings, figured this whole system out before I ever was given this information. I don't know how that's possible. But somebody figured out that flowers that I prepared in 2000 were going to work with flowers that I would find in 2011. Flowers that came from the San Juan Mountains were going to work perfectly with flowers from Western Australia. Who would know that? It's impossible to know that. But somebody did, because the flowers all build on one another. And it is a system that was given to me. However that works. I don't know who figured this out, but I'm happy they did. But it's like, who says that this flower doesn't work? Well, it might work for some other flower practitioner. It doesn't mean, it's just the system that I've developed is very consistent and coherent. And when I walk into a mountain like 15,000 feet in the Andes, I sent out, God gave me, source divine, gave me a woman. She gave me a mountaineering lady that must have, if you believe in it, known her before, because she knows exactly what I need. And she can run from 15 to 17,000 feet in like a bunny quickly up and down the mountains and I give her flags and she tags all the flowers on a mountain. You know how big that is in the Andes? It's huge. It's impossible, but she makes it possible. And I was given this. This little person came in, she's about 4'8" and strong as a bull. And she can run up and down these mountains. She's one of the mountaineering guides. We have a couple of people that come with me. And she just goes out 4 o'clock in the morning. By 7 o'clock, she's back. She said, yep, got everything marked for you. Go on up and look at them. So instead of me spending days, I'll go up and look for a flag, because this woman she already figured out that it was a highly energized flower. Now, how does that work? It's impossible. So with that, something that would take months or years, I can do in a 7-day trip to the Andes because of that.
Yeah, your story is remarkable.
Without it, it would have.
So many pieces of it blow my mind, and I'm sure people listening are a little bit like, or some people are like, it's hard to believe.
But what's fascinating is it's actually something that complicated has become easy now. It's become easy. Yeah. Because when they come in, the first thing we do when I see a new patient is do something called energy and emotional recall. And it's a technique that developed initially in applied kinesiology in the 1990s, but injury recall and emotional recall, sometimes for the 3-day intensive. And whatever, I market it as the cost of a dental crown for 3 days of intensive work. So it's a great value for people. And sometimes just that procedure would be worth the whole trip, just that. Because if you start out by getting rid of memory of trauma, motorcycle accident 35 years ago, that left the brain in a damaged area, you can fix it sometimes in just 2 or 3 minutes. That goes away, or emotional trauma, somebody being beaten by a previous partner, and you can clear that manually. Then the next thing I do is try and clear it with the frequencies from the flowers. So I have 2 ways of trying to clear past trauma. One of them is manual techniques from energy psychology, and the other one is letting the flowers do their work, which is dimensionally different. I think the floral flowers do things that human beings can't access. They just simply go to places that we normally can't reach.
Yeah, and they're fast and they're safe. So one of the things I love about this product, and I want you to tell me if I'm wrong about this, but my feeling about it is that it will not hurt you if it's not the right, it's sort of like homeopathy. If it's not the right remedy for you, it's not going to hurt you to try it. They're very, very, they're right. And it could also change your life. It could totally structure your life. So
absolutely change your life. And let me tell you what, I had a great homeopath as a teacher for 2 years, and he'd say, well, okay, from India, he says, you give me the right high potency remedy, I can hospitalize you if I wanted to. Don't think they don't have any side effects. And so we have to correct this one thing in homeopathy. If you use the wrong remedy, high potency remedy, and you give it frequently, you can really harm someone. Now, the flowers are different. They're very highly diluted, but on pages 269 to 69, 70, and 71, there's a critical part of that book. It's available as a PDF, and when people contact us, we can send it to them. It says, critical instructions for taking a floral flower essence. And what it points out is that administration of a therapeutic substance that is dynamic, as in a homeopathic or flower essence, the effects of the frequency are additive. So if you give it at 9 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, so on, every time you get it, the frequency set builds, the power of its impact gets bigger. And if you are psychically sensitive and cannot take the power of this, if you use it too many times in a day, you can harm yourself, but not physically. It's energetically. So that means that you would become mentally, potentially overwrought or feeling agitated or something like that. And the book says, if you notice that occurring, stop and then just tone it down and take it far less frequently. So the average beginning dose is 5 drops 3 times a day. That's pretty safe. Then you get people that are like, they're intense, they're spiritually intense, and they go, I don't care what it does to me. I'm going to break this pattern. Give me 2 bottles. I'm going to sip it 50 times a day.
Okay.
And it would blow.
Hold on. You hear that? That's you. You're out there, people. I want to call out the people who are listening to this and who you are, right? Those people who are super cavalier and just say that last piece again, because it's really important. Here.
Well, if you're that person, you better be stable. And some of the people, and I have to admire them because I'm right there watching, I'm saying, wait a minute, what are you doing? And they're saying, it's okay. I've got people around me. I'm going to blow through this thing. And if it makes me feel like I have to be bedridden, it doesn't matter. Now, I don't advise that, but people do this sometimes, and I've seen absolutely extraordinary things. But you don't want to do that. Like if you're psychiatrically unstable, if you're taking anti-anxiety medications and stuff like that, you just simply want to be aware these are powerful substances, but not pharmacologically. They're powerful energetically. So they do not have adverse reactions in pharmacology. They can't, because there's nothing in them. They're only energy. But don't kid yourself, energy can be very powerful. So anyway, those 3 pages really attempt to make it clear. And grab your little book later and you look at it and you'll see that makes clear how you should take flower essences.
Beautiful. So I want to get on to talking about the 3-day intensive, but before we do that, is there anything left unsaid about the flower essences that you feel like if everyone on the planet who was working on healing, which I would argue is everyone on the planet, whether they're actively working their program or not, if everyone knew or had that in their toolbox, if there was one flower essence that everyone should have in their medicine cabinet, like what would your wish be for the planet?
Well, my wish I've already attempted that many times. My guides and guardians said, this needs to be in the most widely distributed water that there is. Whoever can make that happen, to add these things to water so that millions and millions of people get this in their water, it would change the planet. And I absolutely believe that. So I found a very wealthy woman in the Philippines, where I did a lot of flower essence work. She had a tremendous amount of influence, eventually became part of Duterte's government. And because of her intention to change the exploitation from the mining and the destructive companies that are ruining the Philippines, she was killed. She was literally taken out, and I watched her unfortunately die a couple of years ago. But that lady, this is a wonderful story. She was in the Senate building and so on. And we did an experiment. Her family owned the area around a reservoir that feeds Manila. So she said, let's see what happens. Let's go up there and put this in the reservoir. So we did. We had a whole ceremony, and we couldn't follow it up. But that was our idea, feed the federal building, get the essence of love into these people. And as she attempted to do that work, she was killed. And it's a real tragedy that we have that going on at the planet. But yeah, it should be in water. It should be in bottled water. And when I talked to many consultants, they said, that's a very hard thing because all the distribution channels are owned by Coke and Hershey and Pepsi and so on. So very hard to get it widely distributed, but is it possible? Well, we hope so. Because yeah, you could there's a product called Healing Support, to which you would add something called blue-eyed grass, and that one substance could change so many people. Two flowers, actually, two products would be a marvelous thing. Healing Support and blue-eyed grass. So anyway, so yeah, so wouldn't that be wonderful if and there's a little company in Australia that has succeeded in putting flower essences in water, and they're lovely folks, and they're doing a great thing.
Beautiful. So tell us, if somebody wanted to take a next step with you, if they wanted to work with you, for example, to do your 3-day intensive, how does that work, and how do they get in touch with you?
Well, the existing website is davisvitalhealthcenter.com. We are making Dr. Davis 3-day holistic health intensive.com, just all those words with a 3. Dr. spelled out, Davis 3-day holistic health intensive.com. That is supposed to be live now, but it's coming real soon. But they can, anybody, you just Dr. Brent Davis Nashville, I pop up, and they can call or email us, and we'll get back to them. And what that is the people typically come in Monday. They arrive. We see them Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I see them morning, AM, and PM. And one of the things so it's 6 visits. For the people that have neurotoxin illness, Lyme disease, that's something I'm a specialist in because of this area, which has a huge amount of Lyme disease, of which I was, the fond recipient of that. And I get bitten every year. And so I'm re-exposed to Lyme disease every year, as are most people. So the very sad thing is there a permanent cure? Yes, if you never get bit again. So if you are never exposed to it again in ticks, mosquitoes, chiggers, and spiders, all of which can carry this, if you're never exposed to it again, then yeah, you can cure it. Absolutely, you can get rid of it. But mostly what is real is you keep getting re-exposed to it, so you have to learn very effective techniques to control it, is what pretty much where it turns out to be, unless it's, there are people that they're not outside, they don't get re-exposed to it, and so they're okay, they can get rid of it. But anyway, so neurotoxin illness comes in many forms, and you must treat it consecutively. You have to, what I say, hammer it. You just have to hit it. So I use electrofrequencies, laser therapies, all kinds of stuff to get at these destructive infections, which we call them stealth infections. A lot of them I don't think are even characterized. What we're seeing now with the so-called COVID stuff is just one of so many things that are out there. So that's something I always look for in people, and pretty much and it could be in the gut. Somebody's microbiome may be off, or virome may be off. So we've got to look at the biological, integrity of the organism, and we have to look at unconscious mind programming. Now, as a chiropractor, I look at structure, and I'm real good with that, but I don't dwell on it. And most of the time, unless it's a very, very bad injury that resulted in, structural damage, reconstructive surgery, unless it's that kind of stuff, people that are very proficient in applied kinesiology and have a long skill set, we don't need to keep dwelling with structural stuff. We fix it and it's fixed pretty much. But you've got to have a sequential. That's why I love this 3-day. It's my favorite thing that I do, because I see him, I go 3 or 4 hours later, let's see how the body changed. The next morning, well, it was there yesterday, but it's not here today. And then on the last day, seems to be gone. If you can see people that 6 times in a row, and in a perfect world, it could be 2 weeks. You could see them for 2 weeks in a row. That is wonderful. You get very deep-seated healing. And my goal is to get people who are already in the care of very competent physicians, healers, that have really done some good work. Let me work with them and return them to that good care, because you can't, even in 3 days that I do this work, I'm looking for things that haven't been fixed. If I can find stuff that somebody else didn't find and clear it, they leave with a permanently better health inventory. It doesn't mean that they're yet completely well. So it's an ideal partnership to be able to say, come in here, let me do this work, and then go back and continue the healing process.
So in other words, they're already doing a perfect diet, or they've done an elimination diet and respected their body.
Well,
and
very often.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be downgrading our local Nashville citizens, but Southern diet is a real problem. And I'm at the point now where I get these poor people are coming in, they're morbidly obese, they're eating horribly. And I'm kind of at the point where I don't want to deal with that anymore. I mean, they shouldn't be doing that, do your homework. And so the people that are coming in now really have, for the most part, done good things. I have a lot of appreciation for some simple little key items from macrobiotics. And sometimes people miss that. So I'll give them a piece or two of that they can add to their regimen. It makes a huge difference. So, but they already have a familiarity. That's the goal for those folks. And they're coming with nothing back. That's not really appropriate for the 3-day intensive, because I'd have to clear all of this stuff that should have already been cleared. Yeah. So.
Is there anything else that you would like to say to this population from your heart?
If you eliminate one profound limiting belief, well, it's like allowing the receiving of love. And by the way, I mentioned I do a lot of remote flower essence assessments. And on the new website, that's actually an option. You can just choose that. And I do that, and I do it by phone. The normal time period is about 15 minutes. Some people reserve more time. But that is like so crazy, amazing, wonderful. They send me a headshot. I then call them. I don't have to. I can do it without speaking to them. But I can tune into the energy through their photo. And people can look at this. It's called Flora Live Photos of Change. If you just search that on Google, Flora Live Photos of Change, you'll see these before and after pictures. And those were controlled. Those were actually controlled things where the people had that change without doing other interventions. So we get rid of what are called confounding variables. So it was just like, don't add something, don't do anything other than what you're doing, just take the flower essence and let's see what changes. It's crazy sometimes, what you can see change in the face. So Flora Live Photos of Change. Yeah, and that's fun, because that can be done, I do that when I have space between patients, or, I just fill in by doing those.
Well, speaking of space between patients, I know you have some to get back to. So I just want to thank you for taking this time to speak with us, Brent. It's been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you for your grand effort and at putting this whole thing together. It's marvelous, Kristin.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.